My name is Garet. I'm an alcoholic. I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. Right, well, I'm going to share in a way tonight. I'm going to share my experience, strength, and hope here with you guys to let you guys know where I came from, what happened, what my life is like now. That my home group is the Rafters out in Santa Clarita. My sobriety date is 3/17/2013. I got a sponsor. His name is Dick Kiker. He took me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I forever love this man. And I don't know about you, but I absolutely and just love Alcoholics Anonymous. And like when I come up here and I speak from places like this, it's like this energy and this energy and this love and the passion for Alcoholics Anonymous just gets a hold of me. Because where I come from, and you're gonna see is not who I am no more. I've done the 12 steps here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with the sponsor, and it has changed me. And I heard this thing that you can come here into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous any way you want to, but I sure just hope you don't stay that way. And this is that thing. When I come into a room, I come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we get levels of, we got this enthusiasm of going on here. And I come here and I'm enthusiastic about my program of Alcoholics Anonymous or anything that supports recovery. And I come in here and I see other people talking about it, and I can't stop hugging people. I can't stop I okie doke them. You walk up to me and they're reach their hand out, and I grab them and I pull them into me, man, and I hug them, and I'm just welcome, welcome here, and see, and if I didn't get that, if someone didn't do that to me when I got here to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I wouldn't have kept on coming. If I would have walked in a meeting and everybody was just sitting there minding their business, I would have hated it, man. I would have hated it. Thank God that people who have the enthusiasm, who are regular members of Alcoholics Anonymous, who come here and their life has changed substantially from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, from them putting everything they thought they knew about life and about the way to live, and for them to put their trust and their faith and the hope into something else, and that my life would just be better. And that's the story that happened to me. I come here, the first time I ever got and I was able to participate in a 12-step meeting I was on. I was 20 years old. I'm on a 4-yard in Tehachapi State Prison, and up to this point, I'll tell you that up to this point is my parents got divorced at a young age, and my dad lived on one side, I lived on the other. I'm a mama's boy at heart, so I stayed with my mom through thick and thin, through every bad relationship, drug deals. I was that kid that went around with my mom, and I was drugged through everything that an alcoholic and drug addict gets drugged through. Was the way I grew up. And by the time I got into high school, I lasted maybe a few months, and I was gone. I went to the streets of drugs and gangs, and this is the thing, is that I could not stop, even at a young age, drinking alcohol. And my drinking bone is connected to my drug bone, and every time I put a drink inside my system, it's the other side of my brain goes damn, we should get high now. You've done too much alcohol. Let's do some meth, so then it'd be meth and alcohol, and that's what my life would become around. So by the time, what happens is this is my life. It seemed like by the time I even got to be 18 years old, this is what it is, man. As I was out there roaming the streets, I'm drinking, I'm using. I really don't have a place to go at home, and I got a home, but I don't go home because I can't drink and use the way I want to drink and use. And I end up at this place, and I get this car, and this car is a 1977 Toyota Celica, and I bought it for $50, and it took me another 100 to put into it to get it going, and I absolutely love this car. And it seems like every time I put some alcohol in me and some drugs in me, my go-to was this car. And my life is shredded. It's completely in pieces. But here I am. I got this car, and I felt like as long as I had this car, I was holding it together. And every given morning, it doesn't matter how long I stayed up or who I was drinking with. Like I wake up in the morning and I walk outside and I look at this car from a fresh, sober mind. Because I finally get some sleep and I'd be like, damn, this car is ruining my life. I got 50 tickets already in it. The cops won't take it, you know? Like if you look at the car, like it just screams alcoholic and drug addict. Like it has matchbooks in the window so they don't rattle. It has I have a towel and a blanket in the seat so the springs don't poke my butt cheeks. And I ain't gonna lie, like every car I had, I never had keys to it. Like I wanted to be like, I see people with keys and stuff in the cars, but I had this screwdriver, you know, and like I pray every time I get in it to start it, I pray that it start up. And the windshield was shattered. The visors didn't shut down. You know, like the car was a mess, and I take this car in the morning, and I drive down to the liquor store, and what I do is I'm a malt liquor drinker, you know, and I drink that malt liquor, and then I go to the connection's house, and I prefer to get loaded inside of his house, and then I walk outside, and I see that same car. And I'm like, damn, it's a classic, dude. And I swear, man, it was like I lick my hand and I go over those taillights and that trunk, man, and I hit that door and the door opened with ease and comfort, right? And I get in the car and I sit down and it was like a whole different seat, man. I was like, damn, it was like, man, I wouldn't have to use a screwdriver. It was like I just put my finger in there and start it, you know, and then it was like I start driving down the road and it was like all of a sudden like all the tires were right size, you know, and all of a sudden it was like I was looking down the road, and that's the way it was with my life, is that the more I drank and used, that everything that was in my presence, everything that was there, it just became normal. That car just became normal the more I drank and used. And every part of my life, that not talking to my parents for 20 years, that going to, you know, I was one of those ones that like I don't want to put a needle in my arm. I'm not that bad, right? And what happens is I'm in Tehachapi State Prison at the age of 20 years old. I'm on a 4-yard and I got this guy in there. I get out of kitchen detail and it comes up. He's like, hey man, you got to come with me over to this place. They got good coffee. And what it is he took me into a panel in that Tehachapi State Prison, and I sat there in the very very back row. And that's like, you know, that death row, and sat there with my arms crossed, and I sat there, you know, looking at the 6 people that were up there, and I talked and I identified with every single thing that every single one of them. I want to tell nobody that I identified, but I identified. But the thing is I didn't have enough courage or enough strength to go ask that person how they did it. I just figured that I could do it myself. And for the next 10 years, I was in and out of jail, in and out of prison, in and out of prison. I couldn't stay out. There was times I'd get out and I'd stay out for 4 days and I'd go right back in. And there were times that when I get out, I had this little girl, like I did, you know, I'm out. I'm thinking that if I just, you know, I got this job, I got this house, I got this car, I got all this stuff that I think that's keeping me on the right track. I got a little kid coming on the way, and I go to the hospital, and I'm living the tracks, man. I'm living on both sides of the fence here. And she says I'm having that baby, man, and I go to the hospital with her, and I look her dead in the eyes. It's like I looked at lots and lots of people in my life in the eyes. And I said, I'll be back in a minute. And she looked at me, and she said, right now. And I said, look, I'm just going to go downstairs and smoke a cigarette. I'll be right back. And I didn't come back for 3 days. My mom's called me, and she's telling me how I had this beautiful little baby girl, and that, you know, I still could not get to the hospital to see this little girl because of the hold that the drugs and alcohol have on me. And I'm going out there, and my mom, you know, and I get this little kid, and I thought, man, I really thought, like, I would sit there at times, and I would think, man, like, this is enough. Like, I'm going to have a daughter. I'm going to have a family. That's enough. Like, I could stop living the way I'm living now. And it seems like it just got worse. And before you know it, my life looks like this, is that, who's the timer here? I don't need one. I mean, cool. So it's like this, is that I get out of prison, and this little girl is 3 years old. She doesn't really know who her dad is. She's scared. I go right back in. I get back out. That little girl is 6 years old. I spend a little bit more time building her trust and building a relationship with her, and I go back to prison. My mom brings her down to prison. I go from a case. I go from prison back to county, and I'm fighting this case, and I'm in the county jail, and I get called for a visit, and I remember walking in the county jail thinking that one of those girls that I knew out there was coming to visit me, and what it was my mom with my daughter. My daughter's about 6 years old, and she's sitting in this little window like this. And what happens to me is a guy like me looks at my mom, and I get angry, and I get mad, and I start yelling at it. And I talk to my daughter for a couple minutes, and then my mom comes to the window, and I'm like, how could you do this to me? And I looked in her beautiful blue eyes, and she looked right at me, and she says, man, I just want you to know that this little girl loves you no matter what. But for a person like me, who's out there killing himself on a daily with drugs and alcohol, did not know what love is, or I didn't have nothing to put judgment to it on the level of love right here. And I live like this, man, is that I stole a couple of my mom's refrigerators, collected them off. You know, I always told my mom this. It's not like I go in the house. It wasn't like I went there and stole them. My mom was always up. My mom was on drugs too. I go in there and I tell her like I can get some, some of this for your refrigerator, and she'd be like, just come back and make sure you bring me half. And I never make it back. I never make it back, man. And as sick as it is this is how it is. I like to get out of prison, and I like to sneak my way into the neighborhood and not check into parole, and what happens is that I get a bottle as soon as I got on that bus, and by the time I got to my hometown, I started on the drugs, and by about 5 or 6 days later, I find myself in the middle of the desert with some Castrol motor oil, looking at pornos on this TV in this stolen car, and nodding out, and my friends are pulling up, and they're like, what are you doing? And that's where the drugs and alcohol takes me. By the time it's 2012, by this time I'm deep down in my disease, and I can't stop, man. I'm using in the jail system, prison system. I'm using it on the streets. I can't stop putting that, like the drink is my gateway to everything else I put in my system. And in 2012, I get arrested, and I go to this treatment center. And I'm just like, man, I arrived, man. Like, I went to this place. I'm in there for 5 or 6 months. And this is what I learned there. I learned that if I behave and I learn your guys' language, that I can go out on an 8-hour pass, and I can deviate as long as all of us stick together, and I can come back, and I could be somebody of authority at this treatment center I'm at, and I did minimal work. It's that thing. It's this, man. It's like God. It's like this guy is in a casket, and he's right there in the middle. This guy's in a casket, and God's on one side, and the devil's on one side. And this guy comes out of this casket, and he's coming up, and the devil and God are looking at one another, and they see this guy coming up, and he looks at the devil, looks like God, and God, tells his people, he's like, hey, let's go this way. And the devil's like, hey, let's go this way. And as they start walking away, this guy gets up, and he's leaning, and the devil, man, looks at his friend, and he's like, hey, man, stop for a second. I left something over there. And he goes over there, and the guy is standing there on the casket. He sees him, and he's like, oh, whoa. He's like, hey. He's like, why'd you come back? He's like, I forgot something. He's like, well, I haven't made my decision yet. And the guy's like, oh, and the devil's like, all right. He's like, well, you might as well go ahead and come with me. And he's like, but I haven't made no decision yet. He's like, yeah, but you're leaning on that fence, and that fence belongs to me. And for so many years, what I did is I just stayed on this fence. Whether I went through treatment, no matter how many times I swore off with a solemn oath that telling that maybe if I just stop liquor, maybe if I just stop doing drugs, maybe if I just get a job and I was getting paid right, I swear off, man. I ride this fence and then all of a sudden it seemed like it just happened. I put a drink in my body, and I wound up and back in the jail again, and I was in this vicious cycle, and I'm in this treatment center, and I'm just I really thought I was done. I'm in here, I'm listening, I'm going to these meetings, I'm listening to this lingo, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm there for 5 months, and 5 months is like the longest I ever, man, had been on a point where I have not put no drugs or liquor inside my body, and I'm feeling so good. I feel so good, man, and I got all these tickets. I had 168 traffic tickets, fuck. I'm like, God damn, that's a lot, and because I was really thinking I was able to get a driver's license, because that's like the first thing you do when you go into treatment. You're like, I'm gonna get my life back in order. They're like, all right, so where you at? I'm like, I need to get a driver's license. And they're like, hold on, sir. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, look, you're here, but like you can't leave. You're in jail at this treatment center because you got warrants, and I was there for 5-6 months, man, and I don't know what it is. Like I thought I was doing the work there. I really thought I was doing the work, man. And what it was is I was doing the outside work. And that 5 months, man, I had all this paperwork, because what it is I made it look really good on paper. I had the mayor of Pomona, I was doing some volunteer work, and I had the mayor of Pomona write me a letter. I had parole since I was locked up inside this community of a treatment center and stuff like that. And my parole officer had an address for me. Like I had a letter from him too. And then I was graduating. I was doing these packets. I wasn't working out of a book. I was working these packets. And so my counselor wrote me a letter. And then the treatment center wrote me a letter. And then it was off for me to go to court. And I really thought, you know what? This day, it's working for me. It's working for me. And I walk in front of this judge, and I stand there, and he calls my name, and I have all this paper. I'm like, sir, I like to, like a jailhouse lawyer, Oh, sir, I got this paperwork for you, And he takes it and he puts it on the side, and he says, Garet, man, it's so good to see you. He says, people like you don't change. He says, by the looks of your record and stuff like that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm gonna max you out, man. He maxed me out for all those tickets I had in the county jail and all this stuff. He maxed me out in the county, and I'll tell you what happened is I get arrested. It's the first time ever in my life that I had handcuffs on me, clean and sober. I walk in the back, and I go into this holding tank, man, and I'm sitting there, and it's like I'm reflecting on my life. And I realized that everything that I'd done up to this point had led me up to this point. And I'm sitting there, and I'm so sick of this vicious cycle I'm in. And I'm sitting there, man, and it was like, and it really started making sense. Like I went to enough meetings there at this treatment center, and that stuff they were talking about was making sense. And I go inside that place, man, and the jailer comes in, and man, he's like, "You all right?" Because I swear, man, there must have been like tears. Like I was getting emotional inside there because I was so tired on the inside of doing this vicious cycle. And the man I had to be from going from the upstairs down to the downstairs to the general population, and then from there into this jail system where I've been so many times. And I go inside there, man, and this is what happens for the end of my ropes, man, is that they called me for release one night. I've been up to this point. I got me a big book when I was in the county jail. I'm reading it, sponsoring myself. I'm just reading the big book, every count, which is like all day long. And they called me for release, and that release ended up being some kind of a going to the jail and doing some work release program. And I call that person, all of us gangsters call when we get in trouble. I call my mom because I needed an address. My mom was like, "You can use my address," and I get out, and I go from the Metrolink station to the Connections to my mom's. And the next day I walk up, and I'm already late. My first day I'm late, man. I'm high as a kite. The second day he's like, "Look, man." The second day I'm very early. By the third day I got a stolen motorcycle parked down the alley, and I threw my bag of drugs in the front, and I told him I just want to water the lawn today. And then the fourth day I missed. The fifth day I missed, and they have to take me out. And at this point, I'm thinking that if I just got some sleep, my life would be better. And I go somewhere to get some sleep. The cops raid the house. They find my backpack that I've been carrying with me. It has needles in it, and The cop reaches in there, he stabs himself with a needle. Now he's trying to assault on an officer. Now I'm back at the cop car, and my drugs and my high is wearing off, and I really just want to go to sleep. And it's a rough night. I go back in the county jail, and this is I get out. I get out on December 28th, 2012. And I call that treatment center I was at, and I tell them, "You guys got my stuff?" And they're like, "Yes, we have your stuff." And I was like, "I'll be there tomorrow to get it." I stayed up at night. I called them the next day, and I was like, "Today, I'm coming to get it." And they're like, "All right, it's here. Don't worry." The third day I call them, the same time I call them like 7:38 in the morning, really early, and I'm like, I'm on my way. And I called the fourth day, and I said, "You guys really got my stuff there? Because I don't want to," I started turning it around. Like, I don't want to drive all the way there and you guys don't have my stuff, And on that fifth day, I stopped calling them because I wasn't going to make it, man. And this is what happened is that by the end of my ropes, it was like this for me is that by this time I couldn't keep a needle out of my arm. I'm doing drugs, I'm heroin, meth, I'm drinking, I'm doing shots of meth with vodka in it, and I'm turning the Chevron bathrooms into my prison cell. I don't know how long I stay in those bathrooms. I got track marks and abscesses from my ankles up to my neck. I'm homeless on the streets for the past 30 days, and by choice. I'm in the bushes and stuff like that, by choice. And and everybody else is the problem. And it's really bad when you got when I got a little taste of recovery at this treatment center I was at, and all this stuff's going on inside my head, but I can't stop drinking and using. By no choice of mine, I had to put a drug and I would take a drink and put alcohol in my system every single day, and I could not stop, and I wanted to isolate myself more and more away from everything that there was going on. On February 14th of 2013, I don't know how long I've been up, but I'm in some activity on the streets, and this guy's shooting at me. And I'm like from here, probably where the back row chairs are, and I start running as he's shooting at me. I start running towards him, and it's like I really wish I would have died. Because by this time, that what happens to me, that every time I put a liquor in my mouth, in my body, or I put drugs in my system, the next thing I know 2 things are going to happen. One for sure is I'm going to prison. And the second, I just wish I'd die. Because I feel like such a failure. I feel like there's nothing I can do in this world to ever change. Like everything inside of me is like I'm dead emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Dead. And this guy is shooting at me, and I'm in the middle of the street. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning on Valentine's Day, and and what I did is I see this brick. It's like a half a brick. And I remember it's like I'm always seeing in movies how like these guys throw like half a brick and they hit somebody with it, and then like knocks the dude out and fucking makes a big old scene. And I thought I was that guy, so I picked up this brick and I threw it at this guy, and it felt like my arm fell off. And my pants are so big at this time when I was running, it was like they were falling off. And if you would have turned me sideways and they stick my tongue out, I look like a zipper. And that's because my pants fell down, and this is what it is that I get arrested, and a person like me is I'm at home when I get arrested. I'm at home when I'm in prison or I'm in jail, because it seems where I grew up, and I'm uncomfortable when I'm on the streets. And I go into jail, and what happens is I eat happy cards, and I do anything I could to get a head change. So I'm taking the hand sanitizer into a little cup, and I put top ramen, beef ramen packet on it, and I chug it. And then I'd be like, I feel it. I feel it. Right? And I always have somebody with me. I'd be like, you feel it? And to this day, I'm not sure if I even felt it, but god damn, man. But it was something. And this is what it is on March 17th of 2013, I went to my second treatment center. It was in Whittier, California. I arrived off a bus. I remember I arrived on a bus with 14 other guys. I'm in everything I got. I got a blue jumpsuit, bright green boxers. I got my Fighter Life shower shoes. I got this clear plastic bag with like 6 manila envelopes because all those girls, I was writing all their numbers down. And I'm not talking phone numbers, I'm talking booking numbers. And I'm going to write them all. I know 451 Boucher Street, I got you, and I'm like, I'm going to write all of you, pen pal it up. And I walk into this treatment center, man, and I'm no leader, man. I'm no leader. I'm nobody that could sit there and stand up and say, this is what I want. Because up to this point, I don't want to be sober. It's not an option that I wanted. Like, to me, it's still not something that could fix me on the inside. And I go into this place, man, I'm sitting there on the bench, and I'm looking around at everybody, and I'm looking at my feet, man, and through this door comes this guy, and I knew this guy. I'd been on the streets with them I've been in prison with them, and I look, and our eyes catch, and he says, Garet, man, big bro. He's like, so good to see you, and people ain't good to see, it ain't so good to see you. And I look up, man, and I'm like, Levi. He's like, big bro, man. And he comes over to me, and I don't know if anybody can relate to this, man. But he came up to me, and he gave me this big old warm, welcoming hug. It was like an introduction into the Alcoholics Anonymous when someone comes up to you when you're absolutely dying on the inside, when my mind can't make a decision and my body doesn't know what to do. And he comes up, man, and he gives me this big old warm, welcoming hug. And I'm a big guy. He's tiny. He gives me this hug, man, full of compassion and love. And he says, man, I hope you stay here. And then he said the next thing that would just blew my mind. He says, man, I got 9 months in this place right now. I was like, God damn. And I give him that look like, of everything. Because I'm not sure yet, like everything, And he says, yeah, man. He says, I'm going to get a 2-hour break right now. I'm going to go out, hit the gym. He said, I'll be back by the time you get the chow, man. And it was like God, or is it it's like he answered the question that was going on, man. He answered that question for me. He's like, I hope to see you when I get back. And I walked into this office with this lady. And I sat down, and she says, man, and she said, you can go or you can stay. She says, if you go, I'll give you a 24-hour pass before I call your officer. The door's right there. And what I did is I stayed. I sat down there, and I look, I'm from the streets, man. So I wasn't just like, I'm gonna stay. I was like, I'll stay with conditions. Look, I'll stay here if I'm the first one into the donations room because I need clothes that fit. For all those little guys that go into the donations room, and what they do, they take all the big guys' clothes. So what am I stuck with? All the little guys' clothes. So I go into this donation. So I was the first one into the donations room. And what I got some girl capri shorts, no back pockets. I was like, awesome, And I got this UPS shirt that was a size large. I was probably about 75 pounds heavier than what I am right now. And I walked out to my second most favorite place in the treatment center. I walked out back where everybody was smoking cigarettes. Because if you're in the treatment center and you're not smoking cigarettes, like, do you even need to be here? And I'm like, do you even need to be here? And I walked out there, and I seen the groups, and then what happens is I got me a cigarette, and this is where my journey. I don't know what level of surrender it's going to take for anybody here in the program to stay here in the program. Like, I didn't know the work that was going to have to take for me to be able to, from that person I just described, to be the person I am today. Like, I didn't know the level of commitment it's going to take for me to, and the willingness for me to do the work here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But what happens is I'm in this treatment center, and I start getting these little God shots. I start on a day that, I walked into that office, and I surrendered my life and my will to somebody else to show me how to live, because I don't know how to live. And I go inside there, and then I get this counselor, and it was like immediately she tried telling me what to do. And I don't do good with people telling me what to do. And so what it is I got friction right there. And I go in her office, and she never do anything I ever wanted. I'd be like, man, I want to go on a pass. Oh, okay, honey. And she was so tiny, I was so big, and she'd be like, sit on down. And she'd be like, where you want to go? I want to go see my mom. All right. She's like, that's fine. She's like, let's fill this pass out. She'd be like, you have a phone number for your mom? I'd be like, nope. She'd be like, all right, you have an address for your mom? I'd be like, nope. She'd be like, honey, then you can't go see your mom. This is what it is I stayed in a treatment center for 16 months. What it is there is I got my first bike. I started on the path of everything. It seemed like from that point on is when I started building. And this is what happened for me as a guy here. And man, I met this guy at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I arrived late. I became a group leader. I took all these people. I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this guy was sitting there. And I walked in late because I didn't know where I was. It was like I was lost in like north south. Like they print out directions about, all right, you get off this bus. And I was so turned around. I was lost, man. And I walked into this meeting, man, and this guy sharing my story. I went up to this guy and I said, could you be my sponsor? And he walked up to me. This is what the guy did, is he show up to that treatment center and he'd read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He'd read a chapter with me. And then he asked me questions like, do you understand that? Do you know what that word means? And then he said the next thing, he'd be like, has that ever happened to you? Then he said the next thing, and after some time went by, he took me to some other meetings. Just like the commitment guy here, as I go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, to be a time for a commitment. And he elbowed me, and I raised my hand, and I get this commitment. I mean, my first commitment was a coffee treatment. I got a coffee commitment when I was in treatment, and I took it way out. Like, man, I was like I always thought everybody wanted their coffee like John Wayne, you know, like. But there's some people that don't like it that strong, and see, the thing is that I'm always at a level of like I can't tell you I can't tell you, man. I got a job here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll tell you what my life is like today is. I graduated that program, and I got all my chips. I did all the work that I needed to do there, and I moved to Santa Clarita. The first place I went when I got out from underneath this umbrella is I went to the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was at the Raptors. I made me an exit plan. I knew exactly where I was staying and where I was going. I knew where my first meeting was, and I walked into this meeting on a Friday night. It was an old-timers meeting, and I sat down in a chair, and this guy circled me like a hawk, and he gave me his card, and what happened is I went through another spiritual experience with another person that had him take me through the steps. And then what happened is and since I was involved in service and recovery and all this stuff that I remained in, and I got involved. I became involved in the conventions and the panels, and I round people up, and I take them with me, and I get this enthusiasm and passion about Alcoholics Anonymous because my life just constantly started getting better, and everything that I thought could not get better. Like I remember walking out of the DMV when I was in treatment that one time and thinking, and then they're like, dude, they got you down in the computer as mentally retarded. I remember swallowing drugs and then testing me, but I never knew that stuff would stick, you know, and so I had to go do like 3 or 4 phases of physicals and see doctors and all this stuff. And at one point I walked out of there and I called my sponsor and I said, I should just drive a car. Like, I have enough money now because I've been working. Like, I should just be able to drive a car. And he says, why don't you just keep on saving and get your license? All right, I guess that's what I do then. All right, that's what I do then. And this is what my life is like today. I don't have much time left. This is what my life is like today is that every single thing that I walk through here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, that even as people who are pillars here and that recovery community, that we walk all here and we're all on even ground. It says in our book on the bottom of 450 and the top of 451, it says the tides of life flow endlessly up and down, you know, but my recovery must carry a life of its own. Like life happens here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and life happens when I'm out there. I come in here to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because life gets heavy on my shoulders. And I come in here and people are always like, oh man, you know what it is? Like we all got that one thing in common. Like we all drank and some of us used. But that's the one thing we have in common. And the thing that we all have in common here is we got this forgetter. See, if I'm not participating in my recovery and coming to rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and sharing in meetings with the newcomer or with the old-timer or with the mid-timer, what happens is I forget. Because my life gets so good from me just coming in here and sitting down in a chair, and by sitting with people whose life is getting better and hearing about their life, I forget how bad it is when I start drinking and using. And so and then people always hit me with this, and people always hit me with this. They're like, Garet, man, they're like, how come it always seems like your life is so good? Because my life is so good. And the thing is if you come in here and you practice this way of life, like if you thoroughly and honestly take that third step prayer, if you turn your will and your life over to a power greater than yourself, I have to ask myself, then what's the problem? The problem is I like to not give everything to God, and I hold on to it. And then I obsess over it like I obsessed over the drugs, and I turn this little ant into a big hill. And see, I wake up and I have a relationship with God today because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. See, they talk about, like, when I come here to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, they say like the first 9 steps, like, people are always like, oh, it's so big and powerful, and it is when you first come in here. Like, that first 9 steps was like something that I was just like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get through this. But once you do, something happens. And I can't explain it. But I feel it. But see, that the program's in that living steps, 10, 11, and 12. And see, when you come into 10, 11, and 12, and you live in those steps, when you get rid of all that stuff and that path is cleared from your mind to your heart, when you're able to start working with people and getting rid of the selfish ways that you had, because like how they always ask me, how free you want to be? Like, I want to be free. And I find that the only way I'm free is the more I'm involved in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like when I'm an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, participating in that triangle of unity, recovery, and service. Unity, recovery, and service. When I'm in that triangle and I'm participating in the recovery, my life is grand. And I'll end with this: is on my wall in my home group, there's this phone on the wall, and it rings loud, and it's one of those phones like you just want to answer it, and they're like, when you answer the phone, you got to say Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember, man, like I go there and the phone would ring, and I try to bump people. I had a coffee commitment, and still it seemed like somebody would sit there and get the phone before me. And one day it rang, and I got it. Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, back up, people. And there's a guy on the other end, and he's like, I'm dying. Just what I want to hear. You are. What's your address? I'll come over to you right now. He gives me this address. I look at a couple of my guys, and I'm like, you guys ever done a 12-step call? And they're like, 12-step what? The only thing we know is 13, And so what happens is I get this guy with a little bit less time than me, and I get this guy with 1 day. And what happens is I get in my car, and I have one of those newcomer vehicles. I didn't have all the shiny stuff like I do now. I have one of those newcomer vehicles. I got a car for $300 that was wrapped around a telephone pole, and I was so grateful to have this car because I bought it with my own money, and I got a driver's license today. And I get these newcomers in this vehicle, and it reminds me of that Toyota I had, And I drive it over to this guy's house, and I'm telling the guys I'm armed with the facts. I'm armed with the big books of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I go to this guy's house, and I knock on the door, and this is what happens: is the guy answers the door. I said, I'm the guy that you called on the phone, and I came here can I come inside and talk to you? And this guy's like, oh yeah, don't step on nothing. And I walk into this house, and it's rabbit trails of clothes and dirty and beer cans and bottles, and it's a mess, and it smells like how my Toyota did, like dirty socks and alcohol. And I'm looking around, and the newcomer's looking at me like he wants a mask and gloves, and I'm like, man up, and the other guy's looking at me, and the other guy's looking at me like I don't want to be here, and I'm proud to be here with these two guys to show them how it's done, right? And I arm with the facts, and I tell them, watch me, right? This is how it's done. And I walk over to this guy, and they're both watching me. They're like, yeah, we're watching you, all right? So they wanted to hurry up. And I walk over to this guy, and I open it up to the doctor's opinion, and I start reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this guy gets up, and he grabs a pillow, and he's like, man, he's like, no, I don't want to stop drinking today, damn, no, and I'm losing him. The more I read and the louder I get, the more he just buries his head in the pillow, and I give up and utterly defeat. And I look over at my sponsor, they're laughing at me. I need humility too. And I walk over to the next guy, and I'm like, and I hand him the big book. I'm like, you want to try? He's like, absolutely. And he grabs the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he walks over to this guy, and what happens is he's talking about God. And this guy pops up. He's like, not God. He's like, God's the reason why I'm here right now. God is responsible for the reason why my life is where it's at today. And I see the sponsee, and he's in utter defeat, and I call him to the side, and we look at this newcomer, man, and the guy probably has a day, if that. And we like, you want to give it a try? He's like, sure, I'll go over there. Like, do you want to take the book? He's like, I don't need that. He's like, it hasn't worked too good for you guys. So, we get a kick. We're like, we're going to teach this newcomer. Now we're going to show him, right? And we go over there. This is what happens is this new guy walks over to the end of this mattress. And this guy is buried with 2 pillows over his head, and he's wrapped up in a blanket. And he looks around. And goes, hey! And the guy pops up. And he goes, you want to live? And the guy goes, yes. He's like, well, why don't you come with us tonight then? This is what happens in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous is I spent so much time out there trying to die that now I come into rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I put everything into living. I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous and the life it has given to me. And I owe everything that has happened in my life is just one thing. There's 2 things I learned here. And that is God has done everything for me that I can never do for myself. And the love that the program and the people in the program have showed me is what I got into me today. And if you can get some God and you can get some love, then you can get a life. So thank you for letting me share.